I'm Jackson. I have zero experience with carpentry.
I studied at a school for historic preservation in Boston and learned about how things were built, 250 years ago.
There's a long way to go. I'm nowhere near the top. Not that I thought I was, but there's so much more to do out there.
Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. Today we're talking about books. Brent has assembled a bunch of dusty old tomes here that we're going to go through and talk about. We mentioned it on the last episode, but there have been a little bit of pre-screening that we've done to check out these books, and so I'm excited to talk about what's inside of them. Brent always says it's very important to look at the past and see how they used to do things, so that's the purpose.
So you guys know I'm writing my millwork book, and I've already missed 2 deadlines.
What does that mean? Like, just a little insight into the writing process. Like, are they literally like, you need to have this book done by this point, or are they paying you, or what's the deal?
They're not saying it like, Vinny the tough guy. Hey, I need your book.
Yeah, we're gonna break your knees if you don't.
They're not doing that. They're I signed the contract. They said, when do you think you can have it done? I said, July.
Yeah.
And they were like, great. They put down July. July gets closed. How's the manuscript coming? There's no way I'm going to have it finished. Okay, let's do December. Okay, I should have it done by December.
You needed a SMART goal.
Yeah. Touche. Nice. And so
what?
The December's come around. I said, it's Christmas, family. I'm not getting the things back from readers. This isn't going to work. In fact, if you want to start reading, I'm looking at Richard.
I do.
I can give you chapters and stuff to read, and you can give me your feedback.
Yeah.
That'd actually be really helpful.
Yes, send them over.
Anyway, so now we've moved it to March, and I should hit that. I'm 80% the way there.
So it's not like we're just sitting there on procrastination zone, like, I'm not.
Yeah, I'm getting the feeling like you're not even started.
Yeah.
No, I mean, well, that's why we're talking about this, because I have discovered and learned about a bunch of stuff by reading these old books. Now, the whole premise with the book is that
this is with your book, not with one of these.
Correct. It's millwork. Okay, 1740 to 1950.
So riveting stuff.
Yeah. Real page turner.
Yeah.
So let's just say it's mantles. Okay. What were we building in 1740, right? And so the premise is that we're going to these old pattern books like this that were written, and I've got pattern books about every 10 years. I've got a new pattern book, and that pattern book shows you kind of what the progression and change that's happening in building, from Georgian to Federal to Greek Revival. These pattern books change, but they're written by builders for builders. Okay, most of the time there's gentleman pattern books which are written for kind of architecty, but these were really written for the builder with real clear instructions.
When you say you have one every 10 years, you're saying from 17, like...
Yeah, I got 1740, 1751, 1757, 1766, 17,
And is that because it's hard to find them?
Okay. Yeah.
Where do you source them? eBay?
Rarebooks.com?
eBay is one. I go to auction sites and type that in, and they'll occasionally come up. I've got a book dealer up in New England, Steve Schuler.
Wow.
I got a dealer.
Wait,
and he
does
gets
he
me
have a
books.
website?
Not a good one. It's not like one you can go browse around.
I know, but it's got like a bunch of old books on it, right?
He sends out a newsletter, and that's how I follow him. And so, but he's been a friend for a long time. And so you just slowly collect these things and find them. And so I did do, like, I went to Winter Tour when this book thing first started, and I scanned a bunch of books there and a bunch of historic titles that they've had there. So some of it was finding that. Sometimes you find gold in these books. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sometimes you find things, and one of the drops on Patreon, if you guys were there, was
if you're on the Patreon, Brent has a weekly book deal. Book drop where he goes through looking to the past. What is it called?
It's just a library,
peek into the past?
Consolidated,
so
curated library search.
It's a curated library that he's doing, and it's got a lot of great information, a lot of great
So
jobs in
William
there.
Halfpenny in 1740 had a chart that basically said this is the size your column should be if your ceiling height is 10 feet. And so those are things that I'm having when I do videos that people are still asking me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm fixing houses and the columns are always wrong. They're like, well, what should the columns be? Oh, that's what they were figuring out in 1740. And so all the proportions, all the details for how you used to build was in these books. Now, the books are really, or not really hard. They're hard to read, okay? Because the S, okay, looks like an F. So if they say glass, it looks like glaff, right? And so you're like, and then you have to train your mind to go, oh, that's an S. Okay,
Is that Elizabethan English? Or
I think it was just it was
Just something to laugh at.
So
Yeah, is there typeface? It's the way that they wrote it. I don't think it was because they didn't have the letter or something. I think it was just like
well, they had S's, right? But they
Yeah.
just put an F.
or like
was just
it
like-
looks like an F because it's like
so anyway,
Oh,
this-
okay.
it's the swoop one.
it looks like an S. So
It looks like an incomplete 8. You know those S's,
like this one is a good example. It'll have
like the really high drawn out one.
these things. Says molding fills to windows or doors fiked on worked for this followed. Okay, so it's molding sills, not fills, to windows or doors spiked, not fiked, on work out of the solid, not followed. Right, so it's just.
Just looking at it, it looks like that. The only distinction between the F and the S really just looks like the bottom swoop. Like they really swoop the top of the F, the bottom of yeah.
Well, I mean, that stool's right there. It looks like an F.
It does. It does. It even has the cross in the middle. So,
So
I mean, it's hard to tell.
it's hard to tell. So there's little things like that make it hard to read. Okay, and so sometimes you're just stumbling through these things,
Fumbling.
Like then, even after I said that, okay, what are they talking about? Molding sills to windows and doors spiked on or worked out of solid if the projections are equal, charge for each, okay, in proportion to the length, okay, and then it says 3 shillings, 9 pence.
So you're charging by the foot of how long this window stool is, and you're going to spike it to the sill with the nail, right?
That's right. So this is exactly what you do. You read it and you go, okay, they must mean that they're doing this, to this, to this, to this. And
So if I have a 5-foot sill, I'll make 10 shillings, right?
You will.
something. But the deal is then you put into your mind and you go, okay, so basically when basically the way they used to build, okay, is they actually molded their windowsills, okay? So that means you're building a block and then you're either applying a molding to it, okay? Very different than a windowsill that we have today. There's no molding on that.
Yeah.
Right. And so then you start looking at those historic houses and you realize their windowsills are 3 inches plus a molding underneath it. That's what they're pricing. And so it's like you're taking all this information, you're thinking about how it was built and remembering the historic way of doing it.
Because the other side of it is that's their only frame of reference for how things are done. It is like, and so when they're writing that, they're thinking, well, yeah, I can picture a window today versus we can picture
Right.
an Anderson window today.
Right.
And it's like, wait, that doesn't have.
So
What is that?
I was saying, what is this book called?
this book is called The Carpenter's Company of Philadelphia.
Is that the
Have I
one
talked
Thomas
about that?
Jefferson wanted?
Yes.
And he couldn't get it?
Yeah. This is the one I talked about this one
Yeah.
before.
You've talked about it in your videos.
So
Yeah, I've seen it in your
it's
videos.
the 1786 rule book. Okay, so this was their pricing sheet. Okay, and what was interesting, one thing that's interesting is if they had a door surround. Okay, they price it not well. That door surround is going to be $10,000. They say, well, that base molding because you've got a double rib on that, that's this much a foot. That pilaster because it's entasis and fluted is this much a foot, and every single piece on that pediment is priced out with the raking cornice and all these different things. And so then
Versus today.
versus
just
today
to
where we
help the
might
layman.
we might measure it and go, well, we've built that before, and so last time remember we did that so and so job. This is how Hull prices it. We did this. It was about
It took this
$10.
long.
It took us this long. It was 15,000. We made a little bit of money. We can do that again. It's just
The other, way of pricing it is just to go to other houses, it's like you've got this amount of windows. This is what the window you're buying. This is how much it's going to cost, rather than doing that piece by piece, right?
Yes. So you can price things by the piece. You can price things by the hour. Okay. You can price things by the square footage, right? So, that's a 10 by 10 door. So it's, $200 a foot. It's that much, right?
So some people do still price piece by piece.
People and price it in different ways. Typically what I recommend is when you're estimating, at least estimate two different ways, right? Go by the square footage, have a rough square foot number, but also have a piece number. And when we're pricing our windows, we go, look, we've got 30 board feet of lumber in that window. We know we know there's this much material with the waste. We've got this much material, and then we go, that should be take this anyway. So you're doing labor and materials, and anyway, the it's been fun because I've learned a ton. Okay. About how they used to build and what was going on. And I found a book that I originally had kind of ignored in my deal, but now I really appreciate. It's called Palladio Londoninus. Londoninus.
It's Londinensis.
Londoninus.
Hold on.
Zoom in on that. Okay, Londoninus.
Londininus. It's hard. That's a hard one.
It's basically William Solomon. Okay, is the writer, and he has the reason he's calling it Palladio Londoninus is because he's basically taken Palladio's ideas and applying them to London. Okay. So this is a 1734 book, and these would be applying Palladio to London architecture as a builder in 1734.
Interesting.
Okay, so
it is a reprint, 1969.
This is a reprint. Okay,
that's the original.
Is the original. Now this is a 1767 edition. So
that's 30 years later. They were still printing it.
Yes, and this is like the 7th edition. So there will be changes between these two. But the title page is Plunding Londoninus or London, the Art of Building. Okay,
I like that one better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I love this because I'm always talking about the lost art of building, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's got in 3 parts. One is the geometrical problem. So there is a whole section on, and you can go to it. Problem 9, okay, to make a triangle whose sides shall be the respectively equal to 3 given right lines, right? If you've ever studied Euclidean geometry, that's the way they come up with these problems. So anyway, and a lot of these builder pattern books talk about geometry at the start of the thing to help builders understand how to build, okay? One, put that in the mindset that to be a builder, to be a craftsman in 1750, okay, you had to understand geometry. Okay, that is one thing that we all, as builders, as craftsmen, but even as our audience, no longer looks at things geometrically. So there's no proportional system, which is why they do this thing, because there's a 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-2.2, and all these different things. Proportional systems that were done historically. So geometry is a huge piece of building good today. My things on Instagram, the house fixes, a lot of them are about regulating lines and geometry. And so it does matter. It's really important. Again, and it's the London, the art of building, right? So realize to master building, to understand this, you need to understand how geometry relates to this. Okay. Mm-hmm. Hey, Vitruvian Man, a square and a circle, right? The simplest form of geometry and those proportions. Second part is all about. It goes through the 5 orders, okay? And all the books go through the 5 orders, talking about how the Tuscan system is different from the Corinthian versus the Ionic, and the proportions associated with that thing. So when you get into that stuff, you'll get into these sheets and the breakout of the complete order and all the parts measured out and the relationship between those parts. And there's all kinds of cool charts in here and everything else.
Because the proportions change from order to order. right?
Yes.
Like Tuscan is
Correct.
1 to 8, or I don't know what that it actually is, but
it's 1 to 7.
okay.
Yeah. So
In Corinthians 1 to 15, is that right?
1 to 9.
Okay.
1 to 10, something
So
like
I got
that.
some reading to do.
Yeah. So
It's cool to know that there's a proportion associated with each order.
Because then you can feel confident
it's
in what you're building.
huge.
Yeah.
It is huge. This is the point.
If you hit your hand hard enough, it'll get it.
There is, but this is the deal. This is the lost art of building that we've forgotten. We no longer practice. We no longer recognize as important. And you open a book like this, and you're like, just this fog clears away.
Yeah.
And you're just like, there's paradise back there if we would,
Apply it.
apply it.
This might be just a dumb realization. You're talking about this as if they don't teach this stuff in architecture school.
They don't.
Are you confident in that? Is that for real?
1,000%.
What do they teach
The
them?
only school that they teach that teaches classical architecture is Notre Dame. Okay. Actually, there's a few more. There's a couple in Utah. There are beginning to be some schools that will study classical architecture. We've had this conversation before. There's a hostile environment to classical architecture in modern schools. And so it is not being taught.
Why is that? Why would they not teach this? Because this is gorgeous.
This is perfect. Look at this door, okay? And I'll show you the picture here, okay? And this is the kind of thing that would be in an historic pattern book, okay? You see 2.5 circles there in that door. What does that mean, okay? It means that there's a height and width proportion, okay? And all of these have this. Look at the circles on the side, okay, showing the height to width. We talked about the Tuscan order being 1 to 7, 1 diameter in width to 7 diameters tall, right? That everything was broken out proportionally. And so, you look through this and you're like, well, that's a beautiful door. Oh, and there's a 2.5 to 1 proportion on that height. Oh, and there's 8 circles tall, right? And you say, well, that's how you lay it out, right? And so it's just like, this is magic dust. And if you wanted to, build beautiful things, here's the recipe, here's this things. And it's just like, this is glossed over. It's lost. It's lost. And so, the opportunity for us to build better and more beautiful things today is right here. And so
That's crazy.
it's crazy.
Look at
That
this
chart.
page. Yeah. It's a page just full of the proportions.
Yeah.
Look, show that to camera. That's crazy.
I showed this in my drop
This
because
looks like a codex. Like for audio listeners, it literally looks like a cipher or like a coding. I don't know. It's crazy. It's just a page full of numbers.
so what it is, this
Like
is
national treasure.
the description and use of the table for finding the diameter in proportion to the height of columns and pilasters. Okay?
That's what that whole chart
That's what
is
that whole
about.
thing is. And so on the far right side, it's the height of the column in feet of inches. So they got 5 through 19 feet. Okay. And then whether it's the Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, or Corinthian
It
order,
changes. They have
a
tells you
different-
what that is.
So if I wanted a Corinthian layout for a 15-foot ceiling, what would it be?
Well, the diameter would be 18 inches.
There it is.
I mean, just right there. And so
I don't have to sit there.
You don't
and,
have to
like,
sit there
figure
and
it
do the
out.
math and everything
Is
else.
this gonna look stupid when I put it together? It
Now,
won't.
what one of the sheets that you'll see in here is this
to
this
page
sheet.
57.
Okay,
There it is.
So the Doric order, and it has just the pedestal. You flip the page, and it shows the column, the shaft, and then you flip the page again, and it shows the entablature. Okay, whereas if you buy this original book, okay, this is one
He's
I
gonna
found
flex on us
I
now.
found on eBay.
eBay.
And actually, I bought this in
Auction.
an auction. There's the whole thing, like on one sheet,
I'll hold the
right? That's folds out. That has the whole
That's
part,
like a piece of artwork.
every
Like, I would
part
frame
labeled,
that.
all the sizes and everything else. And so this is like, I don't know what this would be comparison to. This is like a doctorate or a master's
Definitely.
in architecture and design that's in these old books that has just been forgotten. I mean, it's incredible stuff.
It's crazy. Like, I believe you, but it's crazy to me to hear that architecture schools aren't teaching architecture. You know
Because
what I
they
mean?
want to be fresh and new and cutting edge.
I mean, there's just look at the buildings around us.
Yeah.
Okay. Just look at all the new buildings being built. Show me a classical one.
Yeah.
There aren't any. Okay. Why? Because the architects aren't being trained in that.
Would you ever try to do commercial buildings?
Well, we do commercial restorations.
Or I mean, like a ground up, like
Yeah.
classical building. Because if they're like, man, no one can do this except for Hull. Because
Yeah. I mean, love to do that.
that
Yeah.
would be awesome.
Yeah. We're doing more and more commercial stuff. And so it's, yeah. I mean, it's something we.
So if they came to you and said, we want our next post office, design class, you would do it? That'd be awesome.
Yes. I mean, there's, we're probably limited by size. I mean, we've done a $20 million job. So if a $100 million job came up and they had a strict deadline, they had all these things, I wouldn't touch it, right? But if they had a $6 million project that they wanted done, we'd do that all day long. A $10 million project. But, I mean, when you get bigger, if you get a $30 million project, it takes a different.
Like thinking about like SMU's campus. Like I went to SMU, they have giant buildings that are built classically.
Classically.
Are they not?
No, they're terrible.
Oh, just kidding.
Terrible classicism. They are built in the classical style. Okay,
Yeah.
The classicism is bad.
The
Okay?
execution, I guess.
The execution, the design.
There's some buildings that are good, right? Dallas Hall.
The historic buildings are unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's why those new buildings are designed that way, because it has a
trying to copy
classical
it.
basis.
Yeah.
But those new buildings are just ugly.
So do you think the
gross.
problem with our buildings then is that there's no guys like you who know about this? It's just giant companies who can meet that deadline?
Because that's what I was
saying,
going to say. Because SMU calls you up, you would be able to say no. You would have to say no because you don't have the squad to go put together.
I don't have the insurance, your bonding capacity. I don't have some of those commercial requirements that they need in order to have you do the work.
If like
I would be a consultant on a job like that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
Running
the
it.
But
the
if
GC.
someone came to you and said, we only want it to be done by, like, I know this is a fantasy situation, but I'm just curious, like, would you go out and get it certified commercially, get a bigger crew of guys, or no? Is it just not worth it? Like, even if they're like, no time, just we've got the right amount of money, no deadline really.
No, it'd be great.
And if you don't do
fun.
it,
You
we're
would do
going
it?
with the modern style. So, right? So you have to step up to the plate here.
Again, you just put some stipulations in there.
Yeah.
But by them saying that we don't have a time schedule means that we want it done right.
Yeah.
Means that we're going to wait for the kind
Yeah.
of craftsmen who
Right.
actually know how to carve a Corinthian column and
Right.
realize that
Yeah.
that isn't something you're going to get at Home Depot. And so we're about to start working on a house in Dallas with the architect like that, and it's going to be a $30 million house, maybe a $50 million house. We're not the GC. We're just going to be a sub doing millwork. But that actually has a very the homeowner says he wants it done in 2 years, and so
That's quick.
it's really quick for a $30 million house.
Yes.
That's
No,
really
this
quick.
is from the ground up.
And
He's
so
gonna have to. Someone's gonna have to get realistic with him.
But what they're doing, they're saying, look, in order to do that, we can't go to any millwork company. We need to go to specific millwork companies who only can, because he wants that level of quality, but he also wants it fast. Now, you know that thing that
The
you
pie
can,
chart,
you can have it fast, you can have it good, or you can have it cheap, or whatever those things are. Pick two. His two is speed and quality.
So price doesn't matter.
Price doesn't matter, right? So he's basically saying, no, I want that quality and I want that speed,
And I'll pay to get
and
it
I'll, and I'll
fast.
pay to
Okay.
and I'll pay to get it.
So that is possible then.
It's the Elon Musk story.
I don't know if it's possible.
Okay.
Because I think it is really hard. Okay, let me say it that way. And when the general contractor talked to us about it, he said 2 years. I was like, yikes, because I don't even know. I mean, there's going to be, 50 windows that are all $20,000 windows. Okay. And so the hardware for that thing is you can't buy it off the shelf. It's going to have to be custom made. So, I don't know if we can have the window installed with hardware by that time.
Because that doesn't depend on you. That depends on supply chain.
And just
other companies.
and so a lot of the people that make really great brass, historically accurate hardware, there's not doing it a lot, and so they have to tool up. They might have 20 guys working for them, but it might take them a year and a half to make it.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, How did we get here?
We were
I
just
was
talking
just-
about
yeah.
in theory, like if you were asked to do a commercial
Yeah,
job,
no,
would
no.
you do it?
Yeah, I mean,
Because we're sitting here saying all these commercial buildings suck, but who's going to do it?
Because also, like, if no one does it, we're just going to keep getting the bad quality of stuff.
Well, I mean,
right?
there are people doing it. Okay, if you look at Old Parkland Hospital, the development over in Dallas by Harlan Crow,
Yeah.
he's doing that. He's spending the money and doing a new classical development. Okay, he's got a rotunda. He's got a tower. He's got some of the classical elements all in this old Parkland Hospital campus, and it's completely classical. Okay, the typical price per square foot a lot of contractors developers work at, he's like 10x that thing. And he's doing it at this kind of level. So it is happening. In Colonial Williamsburg, Quinlan Terry did a commercial development there that was done completely classically. There are pockets of people around the world, okay, not just in the U.S., that still practice that stuff. Robert Adam is an architect in England that does that, Quinlan Terry. And so anyway, so it is happening, but it's like all the great residential commercial architects in America right now, they go to Notre Dame, and there's a big fair, and all those people get hired by Notre Dame, from Notre Dame into those classical firms like Ferguson, Schmamanen, Robert Stern, a bunch of the big name architecture firms that do crazy things like that. They're hiring from Notre Dame. So anyway,
You prefer homes than to to commercial?
yeah, I mean, commercial tends to be cheap, right? Commercial, I'm always amazed that, a homeowner will look at a drywall finish and go up to it and go, I don't like how this is, dot here. Commercial will never do that.
No.
Commercial will just be like, yeah, where's the rubber base mold? It's just, and maybe if you forgot it, they wouldn't even notice. But a homeowner, they take a lot of, personal pride in that thing. And so they want it done that way. So, I probably like residential just because people care more, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. This is where they're home. They're going
right,
to live there.
Exactly.
Rubber base. I had this guy that we used to do stuff for. We did like trim in his house, and he was a painting contractor. He's like, Richard, I got a bunch of rubber base if you ever need to do rubber base. When y'all get slow, I got a bunch of rubber base. I was just like, all right, Brian.
That was a good accent you had there.
Oh yeah, I can do a lot of good accents.
Do an English accent.
No, I can't. You put me on the spot. I'll practice it and then I'll come back.
What if Brian was English? Say
That's you.
Yeah.
Hey, you haven't done our Australian people in a while,
Oh, yeah, the Australians, mate. Yeah, they did. There was someone who commented something about Australia recently. I think Sebastian.
We've got some Australian listeners.
Yeah, we got a lot.
Shout out.
Yeah. Shout out. Might be closer to
rubber
New
base
Zealand, and
in
it
that.
might be more. Got rubber base. Yeah.
Got a lot of rubber base.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Let me ask you about your millwork. Is it called Millwork Bible?
Well, it hasn't been completely titled yet.
It says thou shalt not have MDF. And
Exactly.
what's the... Walk me through this book. Like, is it mantles,
Who's it for?
staircases?
Is it another version of this?
No, it's for preservationists. It's for architects. It's for people that those would be the two historians. Those would be the three groups, but certainly craftsmen. The hope is that you read the book and it becomes this tool, so that like when I presented the book to the publisher, I said I can do it by this is what was available in the Georgian period, this is what available in the federal period, organize it that way, or I can organize it by here's doors, here's windows, here's stairs, here's mantles. And they're like, everybody was like, no, by topic, not by time period. So everybody wanted,
Really?
yeah, I was surprised by that. So
I thought it would be the other way.
Yeah.
yeah. So what the chapters are is there's doors chapter, window chapter, stairs, mantles, cabinets and built-ins.
And then amidst that, you're doing it by category?
That is category.
No, I'm saying
Like a Victorian mantle.
Amidst
whatever.
that, you're
So
going
then
we're in mantles.
Yeah. So here's what was available in the catalogs, and realize that before 1850, there's a set number of pattern books in America that builders were building from. So you're like, well, how did the Drayton Hall get built, right? How did
give me context there. What do you
Drayton
mean?
Hall is a very famous historic house in outside of Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
How did Mount Vernon get built? How did Monticello get built? And so
Because they were built before before 1850 is what you're saying?
they were built before 1850, correct? They're very famous historic houses. How were they built? Who built them? What were they looking at? Well, if you know about Monticello and Thomas Jefferson, you know that he was looking at Palladio pattern books, right? Because Palladio was his Bible, and he said that many times. But and so those craftsmen were looking at books, okay? Well, there weren't very many, okay? So especially in 1740, there's only like 3 books that they could have used. By 1780, there's Abraham Swan, Beatty Langley. There's a bunch of different books. They were available in London in, say, 1740. There isn't an American version, and there's people that have actually gone and traced these pattern books and figured out where they were sold. They actually go to bookstore catalogs from 1750, read through the books, and go, okay, well, there's one from Boston, and so all this deep, dorky research into figuring out which books were available in America. And so there's a limited number. In 1780, there's 5 or 6 books that they could have used. William Buckland, who's a pattern book, who was a great master builder in Virginia and then Maryland, when he died, he had, I think, 11 books or 9 books. 6 of them or 5 of them were building books.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a master builder. These were the books he was looking at. Okay, so anyway, the book is a study of what were guys looking at, right? What was available, and then also trying to include contemporary pictures of historic things that we know are Georgian, or we know are federal, or we know. And so it's not only looking at these pattern books going, oh, there's a mantle that was available by Beatty Langley. You're also going, oh, and in the at Winter Tour, because the Somerset House, we actually have a mantle, and this is what it looked like.
You did that in the other Winter Tour book. The Hampton Room was like a Beatty Langley mantle.
Yeah.
And then
the mantle was an Abraham Swan mantle, and then, but yes, it was a Palladio cornice in that. In that,
I like that because you showed what it was based on. So this is going to be like a bigger version.
So I'm trying to make the book as practical as possible, and what I'm finding is, for instance, the cabinetries and built-in. There aren't any. Okay, they're very rarely mentioned in the pattern books. Okay, well, why is that? Well, then you have to sit there and go, well, people didn't have china. People didn't have ready-made clothes. People didn't have, their closets. There wasn't they didn't have kitchens, right? And so they didn't have china. They didn't have plates where they needed to store it. So there wasn't a china cabinet, right? There were, but I'm finding they're pretty rare.
Far and few between.
So how do you write a helpful book today? That's what I want this book to be, is helpful. Helping them understand what a Georgian mantle or the Georgian bookcase looked like, when there isn't any evidence in these books of what that looked like. Well, then you have to go
because these are just like plates.
Yes,
these aren't pictures. Yours is going to have like you said, contemporary pictures of that.
I've got both. I mean, the mantle chapter has 100 different plates, 100 different illustrations of showing. Here's what was available in Abraham Swan's book. Here's what they were doing. Now, I hope that's helpful, but you also need to sprinkle in, like, the mantle.
Geometry of all of it.
Well,
like a real picture.
Like a real picture. And so I'm trying to make this book helpful. Like, asking you, Richard, if you think about that book, what are you thinking that you're going to see? Right? Just a bunch of pictures of historic mantles?
It's crazy because I am building that mantle at my house. And all I'm looking at is pictures I've taken from jobs that I've been on with you, and that traditional American rooms book, that is my guiding light in the whole thing. And I even say that in my videos, like, there's no resources on this really. There's really not. So this is the book that I'm using. So hopefully I sold you some books, because people are like, what book is that? And throw it out there. But yeah, there's no information out there on it.
So, well, that's helpful because there will be a ton of mantles to look at and examples, but it's a you probably see me laboring here trying to because I'm still trying to figure it out in my head. And one reason I haven't finished yet is because I want this to be a really helpful book, but I'm finding I'm hitting these roadblocks. For instance, on stairs, okay, the English tradition and most of our books pre-1820 are all English pattern books. Yeah. Okay, so the very first American pattern book is 1797, and then really it's early 1800s and into the early 1800s that Asher Benjamin, Menard Lefevre, Edward Shaw, all these different pattern book authors, really American ones. So before that, we're all in English. The problem with the English stairs is they have the picture of the Georgian stair, but the federal stair is a metal stair in England, right? It's a metal balustrade, and so the metal balustrade is not really seen in America. So so if you so what do we show? Like, how do I show a stair of what's typical in America when the pattern books at the time show these iron railings, but we don't have a lot of iron railings. And so it's just like, well, now I got to go back and find a bunch of federal stairs to take, to take pictures of. So it's helpful to people to see what's going on.
So the roadblock is you don't have a pattern, like a plate to show.
Right.
For that era.
Yeah.
Would you just say that's a lost art of building area right there?
Well, and
like it's lost.
The other thing is that because those pattern books were written for people who were builders, okay, it isn't a bunch of pretty pictures. It's the geometry of how the stairway goes together.
Yeah.
So it isn't like you could look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's a great design idea. You're actually looking at a how to build it piece that doesn't really show a lot of good detail.
Like a homeowner wouldn't look at that and be like, yeah, that one with all the squares and circles.
Right. It's not going to be something you're going to show to a client and go, I'm thinking about building this.
Yeah.
And so
it's the equivalent of showing someone a like the chord sheet, like the tabs of a song, or like something like that, when you're like, this is how this song's going to come together. And they're like,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Play it for me?
That's actually a great example.
Exactly it.
Instead, you should be playing them the song versus,
Wow. That's amazing.
Good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good analogy, Jackson.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
So again, how do I give a helpful book? Something that chronicles and dates what was there, and then the other piece that I'm really enjoying is how are things changing, and if you look at a Georgian stair versus a Victorian stair, I mean, it's night and day. And I don't think a lot of people could look at a stair and go, oh, that's a Victorian stair, but by looking at this book, I think you can.
The other thing I keep thinking about, which I just keep thinking this could be like, if all these architecture schools aren't teaching this could also be the textbook. But maybe that's a different book. Maybe that's a different. Brent's editors, listen to this. It could just be a different. Like you could. I think these charts and graphs and numbers and all those things are super helpful from someone who's trying to do it. But also, I think that's a book in and of itself.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of books that I sit there, and someone could take this London Art of Building book, okay, go through it and condense it into 20 charts, right? 20 charts that would help people put things together. Then if they back that up with an explanation of how to use it, right? Because we were talking, about the minutes, okay? And a minute is basically a unit of measurement, okay? So all of these...
Can you explain that? Because we talked about that off camera.
So in the... in the edge of this sheet right here, up on the side, you'll see 40, 30, 40, and it's talking about the minutes. Okay, and if you go over here, it has minutes, modules, and then these totals. So the entablature, the column, and the pedestal total 811 minutes. Okay, you're like 811 minutes. Well, every piece and part of that order, okay, is broken out by the minutes, okay? What that means is that you can take a 10-foot section of the wall, break it out by all the minutes, okay, and know how tall your...
It's just a fraction thing at that point. So if you've got a 10-foot thing and then you've got 811 minutes equals that 10-foot thing, then it becomes a fraction. So you go, if it's 4 minutes for the pedestal, you do 4 out of 10 and then 811. You do that fraction,
right.
basically.
You do, yeah, but it's 40, right? So
Great.
Yeah, so... But the nice thing about that is that if it's a 9-foot or 12-foot or 15-foot, the minutes still work. They're spread out over that whole dimension. And so,
because it's calculating proportionality, it's not calculating.
It's calculating proportion, right? And so the genius thing about that is that could be, if you then converted the minutes to or gave them a calculator or gave them something that they could do it, this could then be a very handy tool, right, for helping people.
It's the standard.
Proportion and build things out, and no one's doing this. This is the lost art, right? So there's almost a book, like Jackson was saying, in here, but someone's got to go through and break it all out and help people figure out what's going on.
You know what's so funny about that is because I don't have that book, but looking at your book, the Traditional American Rooms book, I'm looking at the pieces and I'm like, okay, that looks like it's about 3 inches. I'm gonna make mine 3 inches, you know. And then I reference like, well, the doorknob's right there. The doorknob's probably like 2 inches, so that's got to be 3 inches. I'm literally like guessing at it, you know.
Well, yeah, I think that's where it becomes really helpful because, I don't know, we have the information. It's
Why did you not let me use this? No. Over there guessing.
But
no.
I'm just saying it's like, it's out there. And so it would just take the littlest bit to take that and put it back into the schools.
It isn't a little bit. It is.
Someone.
It's a lot of work.
That's fair.
Someone needs to do that.
But I'm also just saying, it's not. It feels like right now it's a lost treasure hunt, like the way you're explaining it, where you're like, okay, you got to figure this out. But it's like, it's also, this book exists, and so it's not like we're like, I've got to go to a room, measure it, and figure it out. It's like someone's actually done a ton of legwork here,
a lot of
to where
people.
We actually have the proportions and everything.
Yeah, you're right.
Ready
I mean,
to go.
it's like the treasure chest has been found.
Yeah,
it's just we
got
need to open it and figure out what's inside.
And it's not like, and it's like we've got this treasure that we're not touching because it's like, oh yeah, well the key's hard to use, so well. What are we doing? Like, I don't know. I'm just sitting here thinking of all the schools and all the other stuff. It's just crazy. But it is fun even hearing you, Richard, like talking about, I'm excited about this book. And like, these are the things I'm looking forward to, because when I told my friends in like 3rd grade or whatever, like, my dad wrote a book. Your first book was molding. What was it?
Historic millwork. It was this.
Historic millwork. And all my friends like, oh, we got to buy Brent's book. We got to buy it. Yeah, it's going to be great. And then the book, I showed them a book, and they're like, "Oh, just wasn't. It wasn't
that
like
kind of book."
Because at that point, it was like Harry Potter, Lord of the, like those are the book. That's what we knew was a book. And they're like, "Oh, so he wrote like a textbook?" I'm like, "Yeah, he did." So anyway, kind of funny. So it is fun to see his audience at work here, where it's like, "Oh yeah, this is how," and actually understanding why it's helpful and like all that stuff too.
I think we were talking about goals in the last thing.
Yeah.
That I'm 58. Maybe in the next 10 years, this is something that I would like to kind of dabble in and start building, and kind of the manual for building that based on these last things. It would be, I think, really helpful to people.
It would be really helpful. You could also sell it to schools. I mean, that's a great textbook. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not just a textbook; it's an on-the-job handbook too. There's a lot of uses for it. So
I got to finish this one book first. This one book's tending to have a sticking place.
Yeah.
So
that's great. Guys, is there any other crazy books that we need to address here, or any other?
I mean, I'll just leave it for discovery when they buy my book when it comes out.
Yeah, in March.
I'm trying to think what this one is.
Well, the other thing I was going to say here is, if this was interesting to you and you're an apprentice level on our Patreon and you want to get more of this, is the journeyman level. Brent's doing drops like this every single week. And there are just nuggets of wisdom and good, sources for you guys out there. So if you want to jump in on that, that's just the next level up. And if you're in on that and you're not watching those videos, they're just full of great stuff. So want to encourage you guys there.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.